Ladies and gentlemen, our referee has called a stop to this contest, declaring the winner by knockout and new MMA show!
Greetings and welcome to another exciting round of and new MMA show. I am your host, Michael Hansen. I do all kinds of mystifying things with microphones. Chief among them, I am a professional ring announcer and MMA cage announcer, and I am joined, as I often am, by my two friends who bring MMA punditry to new heights, Mark Priaulx and Omar Artola. Boys, how we doing?
I'm great, man. Ready to go. I look forward to these all week now.
I'm injured, but I'm ready to go.
All right. So on this week's episode, here's our rundown. We're going to start with our first segment on the marquee. We're obviously going to talk about this past Saturday night's UFC Fight Night, Sandhagen versus Dillashaw. We're going to highlight some other performances from that main card. Then we're going to jump into our Priaulx rankings. After that, we're going to talk about some new fight announcements in the MMA world. Then we're going to move on to a big matchup coming up at Bellator. And then finally, we're going to turn our attention to the upcoming UFC Fight Night, Hall versus Strickland. So boys, let's jump right into our first topic on the marquee, our first segment rather. This week on the marquee, the word robberies. This past Saturday night at UFC Fight Night was marred by 3 decisions on the main card that were all controversial on the judges' scorecards. So Mark, I'm going to throw it up to you first. Were all 3 of these decisions robberies in your eyes?
So from where I sit, only one of these 3 was a robbery. And not only that, only one of them in my mind should even be possible of being discussed as a robbery. What I mean by that is I think this word robbery is getting grossly overused in MMA, especially on MMA Twitter. It's just out of control. Every time people see a result that they don't like, it's a robbery. And that's not what a robbery is. The word is losing its significance. It's like the boy who cried wolf. Like it's starting to have no meaning because people just throw it around. The fight could be decided by this much, and people are like, "Oh, robbery," because the guy didn't want to win one. So to me, Dillashaw, Sandhagen, no matter who won that decision, can't be a robbery, which I'll get into. But the fight was super close. There's no how could you possibly score it this way in that fight? It's preference. I felt the same about Barber Maverick, which I know I'm in the minority on, but I felt the same in that fight. I thought that fight came down to preference as well. The only one that I thought was absolutely a robbery was Kyler Phillips and Raulian Paiva. And not even that Phillips should have won because he shouldn't have.
Right.
He just should not have taken the L. That fight was a clear draw. And I don't understand how it was not scored that way. But on the note of the robberies, I wish, and I know not everyone is going to actually take the time to do this, so it's asking a lot, but I wish people would rewatch fights occasionally because it's so hard when you're watching live and then you think it went one way and you want to scream. And I thought that Sandhagen might have won that fight live. Mm-hmm. And then when I watched it back, and again, I didn't think it was a robbery live because I knew it was close as hell. And I was like, I'm not sure. Maybe Sandhagen won. When I went back, I think Dillashaw won. So, and I've watched that fight 5 times now. I've watched all these fights that we're discussing right now probably 5 times. And I wish that other people would take the time to at least watch it back once before they make such a big deal out of robberies. And I don't even mean just randoms on Twitter. I mean people who matter in the MMA community who have a voice, who want to say things without even reanalyzing a fight. So to me, only one was a robbery. I don't know if you want me to start breaking down each fight right now or if we want to let Omar give his take on what he thought.
Yeah, right before I get to Omar, maybe I should just quickly recap these 3 decisions. So at the top of the card, and if you haven't seen these yet, I assume that you are okay with spoilers. So TJ Dillashaw defeated Corey the Sandman Sandhagen by split decision, earning 3 rounds on 2 of the judges' scorecards. Judge Sergio Camijo gave Dillashaw rounds 1, 3, and 4, and Judge Sal Diamano gave Dillashaw rounds 1, 3, and 5, and the other judge, Derek, clearly gave rounds 2, 4, and 5 to Corey Sandhagen. In the co-main event, Raulian Paiva defeated Kyler Phillips by a majority decision. So one of the judges scored that fight 28-28. The other two judges gave Paiva 2 rounds, rounds 2 and 3. And then in the other main card bout, Macy, the future barber, kept her future alive in the UFC, perhaps getting the win over the women's flyweight prospect Miranda Maverick by, again, split decision, earning a 29-28 on 2 judges' scorecards. And a lot of people online, myself included, felt that Maverick took 2 of those rounds. However, the judges' scorecards that mattered, of the 3 judges' scorecards that mattered, only one of them agreed with me. So, Omar, after all that preamble, let me throw it over to you. Do we need to, are we still needing to have a conversation about judging in MMA?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of ambiguity when it comes to judging in MMA. I think there's a lot of preference, which I think is a word that we've already used now at this point when it comes to judging. And I think it's a little too subjective at this point, especially considering that a lot of the judges that seem to be for MMA aren't even from the MMA world. They're from the combat world, but they're not from the MMA world. So if you do have a judge that might be more partial to appreciating the stand-up game as opposed to the ground game, there's going to be a discrepancy in how that fight is judged, right? Or scored. And I don't necessarily think that that's fair. There are fighters who excel on the ground game. They're not trying to stand up with people. And if they can take it down, work their way onto the ground, that's something that they should be rewarded for and not deterred to do because the ref because the judge may not know how to actually judge that appropriately. I think at this point there needs to be a little bit more structure as to how things are scored. Even in boxing, for example, when somebody gets knocked down, there's a point that's deducted, right? You lose a point basically when you get knocked down. There isn't really any of that in MMA. MMA is obviously a lot more chaotic, but you kind of know what you're doing in boxing when it comes to the scoring. Granted, scoring in boxing obviously can be just as crazy sometimes, but there is more of a guideline, I feel like, in boxing than there is in MMA. Not to mention, MMA's rule sets now at this point, there's like 2 different sets of rules, at least for what the UFC goes by. One championship has its own set of rules. There's a lot going on in the MMA world. There doesn't seem to really be like a unified body of rules like there is in boxing. No matter where you go around the world, boxing is still going to be the same rules everywhere, So it does make the judging a little bit difficult. It makes it difficult even as a fan to remember when these 10-8s are supposed to come up more frequently than others. You know what I mean? They've redone the rules so that 10-8s actually happen a little bit more frequently than when they happened before, where you basically had to borderline kill a guy to get a 10-8 round.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to figure out, are we doing the 10-8 rounds in this state? Are we doing, the hand on the floor in this state so that I don't get kneed in the face? We need to have one set of rules that everybody agrees on, that this is what it should be. The rules need to be made by people who have been in the combat world, who have been a part of the process at this point for like the last 30 years. There aren't no-name people at this point. The sport isn't a baby as much anymore. We have people that have gone through, an entire career's worth of MMA that could have knowledge that could change the game for the better at this point. Instead of, frankly, bureaucrats who think that downward elbows that they saw in a movie that broke a brick is a problem. I mean, that's the craziest shit I've ever heard. You can watch a man kick somebody in the head with his shin bone, but the downward elbow, that's the one that got you. That's it. These are people that have no idea what it takes to be a fighter, have no idea what it takes to do anything within that realm. And I don't think that they should be making decisions that are going to impact people's lives, careers, the time that it takes for them to actually get things done. I think real look needs to be taken at the MMA judging. And I think people don't really understand the impact, the real impact that MMA judging is going to have on people in general when it comes to this career.
Mark, in a post-fight quote, Corey Sandhagen said, something along, and I'm paraphrasing, something along the lines of, I thought we were past that, referring to the the fact that even though TJ was the one aggressing a lot and advancing a lot, but Corey was the one landing more significant shots, more significant blows. So him saying, I thought we were past that by now. Do you feel like MMA judging needs to evolve to accommodate new styles in the sport? He seemed to be getting at this idea that judging was still done similar to what it was in the 1990s, say, where it was all about aggression and, remembering Mike Goldberg always going over the rules before a fight and talking about, the fight is decided by octagon control. So do you feel like, I'm going to leave this open-ended for you a little bit. Do you feel like judging has or needs to evolve with the fight game?
So I think at least somewhat significantly it has. I think there's a fair amount of fights in today's day and age where they are scored properly, where someone is not just given credit because they're the advancing party, whereas maybe 10 years back they would have. So I do think that we have made advances in judging, in ruling out things that don't necessarily matter. There's certainly gray area, which is kind of like Omar was touching on. It is a problem in MMA judging, in that, just as an example, if one fighter takes another down and they're on the ground for 3 seconds and the guy hops back up before anything happens, there's some judges who will count that as absolutely nothing because no position was established, no blows were landed. And there's some judges who will count it as something because they're crediting the takedown. Mm-hmm. So there's numerous examples like that in MMA. There's a lot of gray area. But to me, that didn't even apply in the Corey TJ fight. If I can get into my take on that scoring.
Yeah.
So live, I would have kind of agreed with Corey's take, because live, I thought that he was landing more. And I was like, oh, maybe they gave it to TJ because he was advancing, because he was holding him against the fence, when he had his back a million times, landing little knees to the thigh. So I thought that. On the rewatch, that was not my take in either round, because I don't credit those things. I don't credit a guy holding someone against the fence doing nothing. Yeah. And I still scored those rounds. Well, I scored 5 for TJ. 4 I scored super tight, but it didn't matter because TJ already won 1 and 3. So if I'm giving him 5, he's already won the fight.
Yep.
But I'll take round 4 because that seems to be the round with the most controversy online. It seems like most people online think Corey won round 5, which I disagree with. But I'll take round 4 because it's the round everyone is saying that Dillashaw never should have gotten on the card that he got it on. Mm-hmm. I think that round comes down to something else in scoring, which is leg kicks. TJ lands about 10 leg kicks in that round. To me, I value leg kicks. I score a clean calf kick the same way that I score a clean jab. I'm not talking about a jab that snaps your head back. Right. I'm talking about a jab that lands cleanly and the fight continues. That's the same way I'm scoring a calf kick that lands cleanly and the fight continues. A lot of people, particularly fans, I think, are discounting calf kicks in their scoring, and they're seeing that Corey lands 5-6 more punches, and they're like, how does he not win that round?
Right.
Well, he didn't win that round because he got calf kicked 10 times, and he never threw a calf kick the entire round. So that you have to look at all aspects of the fight. So to me, that was kind of the story of round 4. Corey did win the boxing in round 4, but he also got calf kicked 10 times and never threw a kick himself. And as I watched that round, as I said, I've watched it like 5 different times. Every time I watch it, I end dead even or with Dillashaw up slightly. So to me, that round is super close. I don't think that you can say, oh, how does Corey not get this round? And then again, for me, it didn't even matter because I shocked my own self when I'm watching round 5 and I'm scoring it, live, you can't really score it, but on the rewatch, I'm scoring it really closely. Mm-hmm. And I keep waiting for the point where I'm like, oh, I remember Corey did so well. When is he going to jump ahead? And it didn't happen. If anything, he closes the gap and then TJ pours it on late in that round. Yeah, so I'm not sure what I missed live. I really think TJ won round 5. I mean, he cracks him with, and I'm talking punches in that round. He cracks Corey with 5-6 good shots in the last minute of that round. Like he really pours it on. So to me, you know, Corey looked amazing. And we'll get into the performances. I take nothing away from Corey. I don't think he won the fight. I don't think he has some huge gripe about the result of that fight.
And beg my pardon, the actual quote is, I think we're past the point of being durable and being tough and being aggressive wins you the fight. I don't think that's what does it. I also don't think having control and not doing damage should win you a fight.
I agree, and I don't think it's what did it.
I think the counter to that, though, is also the fact that, you know, Sandhagen allowed Dillashaw to nullify a lot of his movement with that control. You know, it's one thing to continuously go for, you know, a takedown or trying to control a person, getting countered, getting moved around, getting boxed up as a result, keep going for the same thing and keep getting boxed up. That wasn't what happened. TJ continuously was able to nullify his movement, nullify Corey's attacks in those moments, especially when he was getting lit up. He charged forward. He was able to get on his back. The knee thing, I think, is where everybody gets crazy about it, right? Is like, if you don't see TJ suplexing this guy in his head or like throwing head kicks at this guy from the clinch or something, it's automatically not exciting, and so therefore it shouldn't be counted as something that's important. The reality is by having him against the cage like that, you stopped Corey Sandhagen from beating your ass in that moment, like he probably was in a few of those instances. The other main thing is that Corey Sandhagen spent a lot of that time hand fighting. He wasn't throwing strikes. He wasn't trying to do anything in those moments but get out of the position. While that's fine, you can't discount the fact that TJ got him in that position, TJ kept him in that position, and TJ was still damaging him in that position. Whether you want to discredit those leg kicks or not, I again challenge you to have your friend go in the backyard, kick you in the leg a few times, and you see how many of those fucking things you can take. It's not cool. It's not cool, man. It hurts. The other thing too is almost on every single one of those breaks, TJ hit him with something. It's not like we just backed away and was like, okay, I held you, I didn't do anything. TJ did things in those exchanges. There wasn't any real dead time. We've seen instances where fighters get into the clinch to take breath, to rest, to you know, not fight anymore. That's not what TJ was doing in the least. You could even see in certain instances where Corey shot on TJ. TJ could have stuffed the takedown and just held him there. That's not what he did either. He stuffed the takedown, he countered it, he went around, he got control, and he continued to attack from the top. There is a difference in the way that TJ reacted to those types of shots and takedown attempts and control attempts and the way that Corey reacted to them. And the fact is, the way that Corey reacted to them allowed his game to get off, and it allowed TJ to continue to get his game even further into the fight. And that's how TJ won, in my opinion. I had him winning 4-1 on the rewatch on the rewatch.
Well, speaking of beatdowns, let's shift our focus to the other two controversial decisions on this card. So Raulian Paiva defeated Kyler Phillips once again by majority decision. One of the judges had it even at 28, and the other two had it 29-28 for Paiva. So speaking of beatdowns, I, for one, and I texted you guys during this fight, I thought that fight could have been and maybe should have been stopped at the end of that first round. And I did manage to rewatch recently. And at the end of that first round, I really thought he was out on his feet, where he actually was on his back, getting rained down on by Phillips. And I thought Keith Peterson could have stopped that fight easily. I thought that Paiva was not intelligently defending himself in the last 10 seconds of that fight. And unlike the recent fight from last weekend, Keith Peterson let Paiva run out the clock. He gave him the clock. So, or at least it seemed like it was that way. So, Mark, what was your take on this fight? How did you score it, or how do you think it should have been decided?
That you can't get more black and white than this fight, in my opinion. The fight is 28-28. I don't want to hear any opinion any other way. I know some people scored round 2 for Kyler Phillips. You're wrong. I know some people gave only a 10-9 in the first round. You're wrong. The fight is 28-28. Paiva wins rounds 2 and 3. Phillips absolutely deserves a 10-8 in round 1. I'll take round 1 first.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing 10-9s.
Amazing.
I mean, agree with you, first of all, that the fight could have been stopped. If you're not scoring that round of 10-8, I don't want you ever judging a fight again. I don't know what else needs to occur in a
what
round.
What else does he have to? Does he have to like shoot him?
So this
on is in either rule set. By the way, let's make that clear. No matter what rule set you're going by,
100%.
That is a 10-8 round.
100%. So this is the one that I said originally was the true robbery on this card. Not that Phillips should have won, but it should have been a draw. The man did not deserve a loss. It's a clear-cut draw. He won round 1. Round 2, like I said, I know some people, Phillips wrestled late and maybe people had some recency bias and thought Phillips took that round. You rewatch that round, Paiva is pouring it on in the first few minutes of that round. And then also wins round 3. But good on him. He came back and he earned himself a draw. It's not right that he got the win. I don't know how these judges, one judge got it right to his credit. I don't know how the other two can possibly explain how they scored that round 10-9. I really do not. And I feel bad for Phillips on that one. He should have at least been able to walk out of there with a draw.
Omar, how did you score that fight? More importantly, how did you score that second round?
That second round was all Paiva's. I mean,
okay.
I to the first round, to Paiva's credit, he survived, right? Somehow. Regardless of the fact that Peterson didn't stop the fight, we've seen people way more out than that as far as I'm concerned. Paiva was still he was still there. He was messed up, but he was still there. Yeah. Round 2, Phillips kind of got put through the same fire to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. And his credit came out on the other end, was able to kind of weather both of those rounds. But I doubt we'll ever see a 10-8 round from Phillips again. He's never going to do that again. He's never going to blow his wad again. Never.
Oh, you think so?
Oh, no. That I guarantee you right now, that was probably the worst experience he's ever had in the octagon by far. Because I can tell you, if he was beating that man's ass, which he was in the first round, right? How crushing must it have been to get your ass handed to you for 2 rounds after that? I mean, he got lit up. Second round for sure. Third round, he was still gassed. I mean, he was gassed for the rest of the fight, period.
He got more gas as the fight went on.
He was scrapping to his credit. Like he was,
man.
Yeah.
He was. And he got kind of a second wind
right
in the third round. And I think Paiva had slowed down in the third round as well. So we were kind of in a relatively even keel at that point.
Yeah.
But I don't know what they said to Paiva in the second round. I don't know. But he beat the shit out of him in the second round. That was a wild fight. Both boys deserve credit for determination just in general.
And Dominic Cruz was right in the second round. He said it's like a washing machine with these two guys.
Yes,
that second round
100%.
was so back and forth. It was a wild round. I mean, the first round was wild in a different sense. It was like, geez, this guy's really putting it on him. But that second round, I thought in that second round, I said, okay, at the end of that first round, he avoided getting stopped because of the clock, maybe. And I thought Paiva's going to come out here and he's going to get finished in the next 30 seconds to the next minute.
Yeah.
But to his credit, Paiva came right out in the second round with a flurry. I was like, oh, he kind of woke up. And the rest of the fight was crazy.
Yeah. The gassing point is interesting.
Yeah.
Seeing his face just drop as Paiva is landing on him and just know that he just completely screwed up,
I guess,
was a moment in the fight that I was just like,
do you think Phillips thought that he screwed up? I wouldn't be surprised if Phillips had a little bit of ire for the referee of like, dude, like, what else did I have to do to get him out of there?
I agree. I don't think he really did anything that he shouldn't have done per se. But I do think I hadn't really thought about the gassing point, because to me, as I was watching the second and third rounds of that fight, I was like, man, Paiva didn't really stand out at all through 4 fights at flyweight. And now here he is moving up in weight and putting it on Kyler Phillips. I was like, that's kind of a random result.
Right.
But it makes more sense when you think about that it probably wouldn't have happened if Phillips didn't wear himself out so much in the first round. So it's a good point by you. I almost wish it was a draw so they could run it back and we could see how it went.
For sure.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, that was just a fun fight in general. I can't imagine the second fight wouldn't be just as entertaining.
All right, let's turn to this last controversial decision. Let's see if we have anything to say about this. Macy the Future Barber defeating Miranda Maverick again by a split decision, 29-28 on two of the judges' scorecards. Omar, I'll send it to you. How did you score this fight?
So in the moment, I had it for Maverick. I had it 2-1. I had her winning the first and the second round, and then I had Macy Barber winning the third round. On the rewatch, I still had it Maverick winning rounds 1 and 2, and Macy Barber winning 3. I was a little bit more purposeful in my rewatch when it came to the second round. Basically, the first 3.5 minutes, I basically discounted because they had basically evened themselves out up until that point. Maverick had basically taken the first minute and 30 of that fight, and then Macy was able to turn it around and take the next minute and 30. So basically up until the middle of that fight, of that round, it was basically even at that point. It was up for grabs. I think that Maverick being able not only to take her down, but also be able to damage her from the top to end the round in that specific round with the way that round was going, I think that was enough for her to win that round. I don't really see how Macy won that round personally based on what I saw, but it was a close fight regardless. This is one of those things, like, to Mark's credit, it didn't feel like a robbery for me. It just felt like a decision that I thought should have gone a different way. The robbery, like we've been talking about, was that Paiva Phillips fight. Mark,
how'd you have that fight?
So I had a little bit of a different take on the second round. Again, I've watched it a handful of times. I'm not going to say I scored it for Barber because honestly, every time I watch it, I end with it even or with one or the other up like this much. And I'm like, you maybe miss one punch here and there. I think I've watched it like 4 times and it's broken even. So, but my point is, it's not a robbery. To me, that second round was incredibly close. My take that's slightly different than Omar's is that I really did think Barber was ahead. Like clearly ahead with a minute left. I thought she was landing the far harder shots and throwing and landing more.
Round?
Huh?
You said the second round or did the whole fight?
No, second round. I'm only talking about the second round. First round was Maverick. Third round was Barber. Same page as Omar. I thought she was landing far harder shots and landing more of them. And even at 125 in that round remaining, Dominic Cruz makes a comment about how much trouble Miranda Maverick is having trying to hit Macy Barber. So even he was aware that she was missing. There wasn't a lot landing. And then she does get the takedown with 50 seconds left. But from 50 seconds to 10 seconds, nothing happens. There's not really position advance. She's on her back, but she's sliding off the top. There's no sub attempt. There's nothing. And then with 10 seconds left, she starts throwing some shots. A lot of them are hitting Macy's arm right here. A few get through. And to me, I'm like, all right, between the takedown and those, she kind of brought it right back to even. I didn't see it as some crazy controversial decision. I totally get why 2 people could see that and say, I'm going to give that to Barber. And I get why another could see it and say, I'm going to give it to Maverick. So to me, I didn't feel like either of them were aggressive as aggressive as they should have been in that fight. It kind of felt like they were both fighting to not lose that fight. Barber in the third was better aggression wise. But until then, I feel like there was kind of a lot of tentativeness in that fight for me.
I felt like Barber started the fight, especially in the first round. I'm not going to say she was running from Miranda Maverick, but she was certainly on her bike, which I think is the nice way of saying it. And I think slowly from the first round to the second to the third, Barber was going like this in terms of shifting her evasiveness, again, to maybe to use a euphemism, from shifting from evasiveness to aggression, of just because the whole time she was busy. In the first round, she was busy on her bike, and she shifted her busyness from being on her bike to being aggressive, and instead of circling away to trying to land more shots. And pairing that with the fact that I think Maverick at 125, she carries around a lot of muscle. And I think that Maverick did seem to fade a little bit in that fight. She faded. I think she got kind of tired chasing Barbara around a lot. Maybe is that a detraction from Barbara, or is that something to give her credit for? I think that's up for debate as well.
Yeah, I kind of think for both of them, it's a little bit hard to have like a firm take on exactly where you think they stand coming out of that fight. I feel like each of their next fights is going to tell us more about where they're at in the division.
For sure.
Yeah. Personally, I'm actually interested to see how this fight goes, a rematch in the next few years. Once they get some other people under their belt, once they because both of them, frankly, are very, very good. I think both of them will climb up the ladder on their own. They'll have their own separate wins at this point, kind of go on their own journey, but they will fight again, and they will fight again once they're in a more elite stage in their careers. I'm ready for that one.
Agree. Right. They do feel like people who could fight again, and I'm sure it will be better than that fight 100%. Was.
Awesome. Let's put a bow on the discussion of judging and scoring for now, and let's go back up the card, boys, and let's talk about the performance of these two main event combatants. Mark, I'm going to start with you. TJ Dillashaw. He gets the win. How do you think he looked? Is TJ Dillashaw back?
He looked like TJ Dillashaw, man. I mean, he looked exactly how he's always looked. Dealt with some adversity early. The cut, obviously, the knee, which was tough. Kind of amazing how he went from limping and clearly being unbalanced when he was trying to throw kicks for a few minutes there to just seemingly saying, all right, I'm done with this knee. I'm just going to push through it. Yeah. I mean, the guy's tough as hell. You can't take it away from him. He's as skilled as ever. Not like Corey didn't give him problems, because he certainly did. To Corey's credit, he looked great. The way he was sidestepping shots, setting up his own shots. I mean, he was breaking TJ's rhythm. The guy is probably a future champ. He is a top shelf talent, and that didn't change just because he lost that fight. So he's going nowhere. But to me, the difference in that fight kind of came down to that Corey was fighting to try to hurt TJ, hoping for the kill shot, hoping to accumulate the damage. TJ was fighting the same way, but also making sure he was winning. And I feel like that was a little bit of the difference, is that Corey didn't have that veteran round winning thought process yet. He was doing some spins that he shouldn't have done that were allowing TJ to get control. He was letting TJ control him. He wasn't thinking so much about other weapons like the calf kick, where TJ was racking up points while still trying to, go back and forth with the boxing. TJ just seemed to have more thought in his head of, let me make sure I win these rounds, while also scrapping, as of course they were. It's a great fight. So I think that's something Corey will learn and obviously be better at each time. But TJ did exactly what he had to do. He was super impressive. Again, to me, I think he did win that fight. And like he said, I think the title shot's got to be next.
Omar, who do you think looked more impressive in this fight?
Personally, I do think Corey kind of looked more impressive just in general. I think the major statement that I took away from that fight, to be honest, is that Corey belongs here. This is exactly where Corey belongs.
Absolutely.
He is not in the elite level because TJ was gone or because people aren't there anymore or whatever the case is. Corey belongs exactly in the spot where he needs to be. And I'm loving the thoughts of all the future matchups that we could have at the top. I'm excited to see what happens with Corey Sandhagen for sure. With that being said, TJ's return was pretty amazing. I enjoyed seeing him fight again. I enjoyed seeing that footwork again. He was a little on the sluggish side, I thought, compared to things I've seen in the past. That being said, he's still fast. I mean, he's fast on his worst day, it seems. So I don't necessarily think it was an overall deterring factor, but it did allow him to get caught with a lot of shots that I think TJ probably wouldn't have normally gotten caught with, right? Mm-hmm. I also think that, you know, he talked about himself being lazy in the fight, and there were positionally, there were things where he was a little too lax, where he didn't seem to have the that sense of urgency to not be in those positions. He was almost a little bit too comfortable to leave himself in dangerous positions, specifically with that leg during that tie up with Corey. Mm-hmm. Normally he would focus, I feel like, on getting out of that position, but instead he was playing around, kind of stayed in there, trying to land shots on Corey. And I just don't think that TJ, again, in the past would have even played that game. He would have been working to get his leg out. If Corey was going to stay on the ground, maybe he would have tried to take it or go to the ground with him in a position that was advantageous to himself, but he wouldn't have just stayed just trapped up in those little legs like that. That just wouldn't have happened. So I think we saw TJ come back with what he needed to do to win that fight, but I don't think it was the best TJ we've ever seen. And I think that's why it wasn't as impressive, I think, as Corey's performance was. With that being said, TJ doesn't look like he needed EPO to keep his gas tank going.
Yeah.
I mean, EPO is not, as far as I know, EPO is not like steroids in the fact that, you know, certain anabolic steroids increase your muscle mass or whatever. And a lot of those gains, you probably aren't going to lose overall, you know, especially if you're going to just continue working out over time, right, and things like that. But those gains, some of those gains are probably permanent. EPO is not necessarily permanent. Those things, if you're not continuously taking some of those drugs or however he was doing it, those effects are going to go away after a certain period of time. And he's had 2 years that he hasn't popped. I mean, he looked good, man. I can't take anything away from his performance. He looked fantastic.
In terms of the EPO, in the lead up of this fight, you know, Dillashaw, you know, he's obviously getting a lot of hate, and he's going to, and maybe rightfully so to a certain degree. But I have to say, it is good to see him, you know, back in the shorts and wearing the gloves in the octagon and doing the fighting thing. He is so good at it, and it is such a privilege. It feels like a privilege to watch him fight. He's just such a talented and tenacious fighter, and he is, I mean, like I remember Joe Rogan saying if he, you know, were to show somebody one fighter to model themselves as, he'd show them Mighty Mouse. I would show somebody TJ Dillashaw personally. And TJ Dillashaw now comes back to what has already become, you know, in his absence, one of the most stacked divisions in the UFC in bantamweight, and he now makes it maybe the best division with him right back in the top 5, or maybe even top 3, or maybe even title contention. So let's shift now to the talking about the performance of Kyler Phillips. Mark, are there any main takeaways? Again, another bantamweight fight. I mean, how good is bantamweight? All these bantamweights. We're going to get to another couple in a little bit. But Mark, what are your main takeaways for Kyler Phillips, and where does he go from here after such a performance in the first round?
I think he's okay. My hope is that the UFC will treat it like it was a draw. My guess is he gets another opponent who, remember, Paiva's not who he was supposed to fight. Paiva was a late replacement. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that Paiva, of course, now Paiva has moved up the ranks, but he wasn't fighting someone that low. So my guess is he gets another top 20-ish, 25-ish level fighter, and we see where he's at. He's so exciting. He fights to finish. You know, he's the kind of guy that the UFC loves. So yeah, I'm sure he'll be matched up with someone exciting in a fight that does matter, and he'll have a chance to right the ship immediately.
Okay. With that being said, if there isn't anything you guys want to add about Barber Maverick, I would love to jump to one of my favorite fights on this card, that being Adrian Yanez defeating Randy the Zohan Costa via TKO at 2 minutes and 11 seconds of round number 2. Omar, I'm going to send it up to you first, because last week you were the one who shouted out Yanez. What do you have to say about this performance, this comeback performance? Omar, go.
he made me nervous. He made me really nervous in the beginning of that fight. But I'm telling you, I love this kid. There's nothing you can tell me when you watch that kid fight that you don't think that he is an elite fighter. I think the main takeaway from this fight was the kid's got mettle. And I think on paper, he has mettle, right? Like, he comes from a fighter family. He has everything that we think he should have in order to be an elite fighter. Right. But that fight, we saw that man get cracked. We saw that man get tagged a lot. We saw him get opened up. We saw him bleed. He not only came back in that second round like a monster, but those body shots are those are things that you have nightmares about. Okay. I guarantee you that man was not okay after those body shots. He went to the back and little tinkles of blood probably came out. I'm just saying. Okay. That uppercut was also disgusting. He went right through the guard. I don't even think he touched his arms when he hit that uppercut. I mean, Yanez is the future. Okay. And this is Yanez at an early stage in his career. God help these people when this man has actual experience, has time to continue to train. The ceiling is not even the word. I mean, what, to the moon? Is that what the kids are saying now? To the moon? Yeah. Yanez to the moon. Okay, that's where I'm at. Let's go.
Mark, what are your thoughts on Yanez's performance?
I mean, Omar summed it up very nicely there. But holy God, what a fight that was.
Yeah.
I mean, in the first round, Yanez was overwhelmed by the amount of artillery that was coming at him. I mean, between the jabs, beautiful jabs from Costa in his face, the head kicks, the speed that Costa was chaining strike to strike was insane. And Yanez just couldn't find it. He couldn't find his feet. He was just getting blitzed. But man, if weathering that storm is not the sign of a great fighter, and then the way he turned it on a dime, I mean, it was maybe 2 minutes from the time that he said, all right, I kind of got my feet here. I got his timing. I'm going to take him out. And in 2 minutes, that was it. He got it. It poured on him for 5 minutes. And then he was just like, oh, all right, I figured this out. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I mean, the kid he's so clean. He is so accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, once he has your timing down, you're dead. He's that good. It's, I don't want to exaggerate it and go too far, but it's kind of Conor-esque.
I was actually going to say that.
The accuracy is just crazy. But yeah, he's a name to watch. I need to see him fight as good as Costa looked. I need to see him fight someone who's a little more proven before I anoint him, but I am ready to anoint.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And with that TKO victory over Costa, he now has a 7-fight win streak. So
that's again,
good.
This fight here is basically just like the same thing where I want to see both of these guys fight in like the next 3-4 years or so, because both of these guys are going to keep climbing the ranks. This was almost like a fight that was almost too early in their careers. But as far as being in the UFC, right? Like, this is something that I guarantee you is going to sell a pay-per-view somewhere down the line. 100%. This is going to headline and will sell a pay-per-view 100%. I just hope we're still around when this happens.
I've heard still around. Where are we going?
I don't know, man. Things are weird nowadays.
It's
man.
a pessimist, man. Jeez.
I've already heard grumblings of Yanez versus Sean O'Malley. What do you guys think about that?
Ooh.
Fuck, I don't know if I'm ready to go that far. Does one of them have to die? Like, God, can't we let Yanez make it up there first?
Yeah, I don't want that fight right now.
Me neither.
I'm tired of O'Malley getting guys that, like, O'Malley at this point needs to fight somebody that's ranked. I think he needs to fight somebody that's ranked, and I think he's already gotten guys who aren't ranked enough to the point where I just want to see if he's able to fight guys at an elite level. I don't want to see him fight guys that I know will be at an elite level at some point, but aren't there now.
Right.
Like O'Malley's been talking all kinds of shit. He's got the followers. He's got everything that you need at this point. Give the kid a real fight. See what happens. We've already been talking about the Frankie Edgar bit. I'm fine
Frankie
with
Edgar, that would be the perfect matchup, because from a promotional standpoint, they need to give O'Malley an established veteran who he, like, to steal a wrestling term, who he can get over on.
Yeah.
So someone like a Frankie Edgar, who with the star power and with the pedigree, with the legacy, who, if Sean O'Malley gets over on Frankie Edgar, now they have the justification to say, okay, now this guy is top 10. They might just shoot him into the top 10. But if they
beat Frankie Edgar, he certainly would.
I mean, he
Right.
should be, yeah.
And if they keep feeding him to other prospects, it might be like Chito Vera all over again, where it's like this guy, they have Sean O'Malley, who's like this new rising star. He keeps like getting it like a poorly timed loss.
Yeah.
And
but it's
keeping
also
him from being ranked.
It also seems like it's a lose-lose for the UFC. It just doesn't seem like a smart move, because if O'Malley loses, just to your point, Mike, he's lost to another prospect. You almost kind of lose the shine that the kid has, almost to a certain extent, right? He's gone through all this nonsense to get to the point where he's at. His stock, I think, is higher at this point than it's ever been. He has the ability and the following to get at least a top 10 opponent. I'm not even saying top 15, top 10 opponent at this point. His skills visually translate to him deserving a top 10 opponent. Mm-hmm. If he loses, you kind of screw that up a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if Yanez loses, what are you doing to that kid? Like that kid is an up and comer. He's going to be the future of that division, 100%. And I think that the same care you seem to have been putting in O'Malley with, cherry picking his fights up until this point, I think Yanez deserves that too. Yanez puts on performances in every fight that he's in. And if you put guys against him that aren't necessarily well known or whatever, he could probably put on some crazy ass performances at that point too. And it's not to say people don't fight back. It's the UFC. These are not cans that are walking through here for the most part. Mm-hmm. So Yanez is going to be going through the fire.
There's plenty of depth at bantamweight. Like, there's plenty of good guys Yanez can fight that aren't Sean O'Malley. You said, I don't think that match would be fair to O'Malley. The guy has earned a ranked opponent, so let's give him a ranked opponent. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you take Yanez from Randy Costa, as good as he looked, to Sean O'Malley. It's too much. We can find someone who's a great test in between there. Matter of fact, as I'm thinking about it, another bantamweight on the card who looked fantastic was Julio Arce, who is a former featherweight, who has a win over Dan Ige, so he's certainly ranked above Yanez at the moment. Yep. And he's moved down to bantamweight, and he looked great. That would be a firefight. Let's make that
down
fight.
For that.
That's
Yep.
a perfect fight. And then one of those guys comes out of that fight, and it's like, okay, now he matters. We don't need to make these crazy jumps up to Sean O'Malley.
Yeah, I really hope they don't go that route. I hope that was just fan fiction.
With that said, Mark, why don't you take us down the rest of the undercard of this UFC Fight Night?
Surely. So just to hit on him quick, Brendan Allen by unanimous decision over Puna Soriano. Told you guys this man is legit. He looked more responsible defensively than he ever has. Those body kicks were devastating. The man is good. I hope I haven't looked. I hope he's ranked. It is time to give him a ranked opponent again. Mm-hmm. He has not lost at middleweight. I didn't even realize the Sean Strickland fight that I mentioned last week where he lost was a short notice fight at 205. So definitely a lot of variables there. A few days notice, end up significantly in weight. So who knows if that was an advantage for Strickland or not. Mm-hmm. But he's 5-0 at middleweight, and he keeps finishing guys prior to this one. It's time to give him a fight mm-hmm. that matters. And I thought Puna looked good as well. He has potential. That won't be the last that we hear from him. Moving past that, Nassourdine Imavov knocked out Ian Heinisch. Great breakthrough win for Imavov. He looked smooth. He certainly moves himself up the rankings with that. On the flip side of that coin is Ian Heinisch, who started hot in the UFC. He's kind of starting to get exposed at this point. He's one of these athletic dudes who just kind of wings hooks. And the more you watch him, the more it seems like his technique might not really be there, and that people have figured that out because he's starting to get cracked pretty cleanly. So I'm not exactly sure where he goes from here after being a guy who kind of had some hype on his name. Moving down past that, Mickey Gall subs Jordan Williams. Easily the most impressive Mickey Gall has ever looked.
Facts.
I mean, my man had power on his punches. He is death on the ground, especially if he has your back. He looked fantastic. And I know he has lost when we've kind of moved him up before, but after seeing him look like that, it's time to do it again and see where he's at. Julio Arce, I mentioned, TKO's Andre Ewell, drops down to bantamweight where he fought pre-UFC. He's been a featherweight in the UFC. But he looked great. He did a great job of walking Ewell down, getting inside that distance range game that Ewell manages to play with a lot of people. He's very tricky there. And Arce just got inside, walked him down, and finished him. I wouldn't have minded Ewell getting a few more seconds on the finish. I thought he was still in it, but great performance from Arce nonetheless. He's going to be an interesting name to watch at bantamweight, which, like we've said, is absolutely on fire right now. And then the last one is Sajara Eubanks, TKOing Elise Reed in her move back to 125, which has always been her best division. She has had some struggles making the weight. She recently had moved up to bantamweight for a few fights where I thought she was going to stay because I thought that she had said the weight cut was too much of an issue. I was surprised to see her back at flyweight in this one. But she was talking a lot about how much she changed her life, changed her diet, changed who's around her, and that she really thinks she's ready for a run. And if she is, that is a name to watch at 125 for sure. She already has wins over Lauren Murphy, who's fighting for the title, and Roxanne Modafferi. So I'd like to see her in a big fight right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
You know, Mickey Gall has come a long way since he defeated CM Punk.
Oh yeah.
I mean, to Mickey's credit, he came into the UFC at 1-0.
Yeah, it's true.
That's right. I forgot that.
Yeah, there's not a ton of fighters who can say that they basically have been with the UFC since the beginning of their careers.
It's a great point.
So to his credit, he's lost, but he's lost to the cream of the crop. It's kind of the same thing with Sage Northcutt. If you guys remember him from way back when now at this point, but Sage also kind of grew up in the UFC earlier on in his career, and he went through some tribulations towards the end of it, obviously, which is why he's over at 1 now. He also looks like a straight up animal now. I don't know if you guys have seen him lately, but he looks scary now.
He's nothing but beef and spinach.
Yeah. But these kids that are basically growing up in the UFC, they're ones to look out for because they're only going to get better. The more fights they go through in the UFC, the better experience they're going to get. Mm-hmm. These guys are training with some elite people that have been in the octagon before. Mickey Gall, I think, has had a relationship with the
Matt Brown, right? Is someone he trains with?
No, it's the brothers. The one with oh my God, he has that disease, the blood disease with the
Jim Miller and Dan Miller.
Thank you.
Yeah,
pretty sure. Jesus.
There it
Lyme
is.
disease. I got there. Lyme disease.
Go.
I got
He's
there.
got Lyme disease? Oh, man.
Oh, dude, he's had Lyme disease for
does,
a majority of his UFC career. That's why people give him so much credit for that entire career because he's done all of that with Lyme disease. Kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm pretty sure he's been training with the Miller brothers for quite some time, if I'm not mistaken. So that's why his BJJ is pretty elite.
It's a good point on Gall about growing up in the octagon because we may just be seeing him now take his career leap skills wise. You know what I mean? So there could be good things to come for him. And his losses are all to established fighters. It's Mike Perry, who's a beast, Diego, who, downside, but the guy's a vet, and Mickey Gall certainly was not at that point, and Randy Brown, who's a young stud. So there's no shame in any of those losses. So I'm interested to see where Mickey Gall goes from here.
Nice.
Who bit who in that Diego Sanchez fight?
Diego said Gall bit him or something like that.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I just remember him having this tooth mark like right by his boob.
Yeah.
It was so crazy. I couldn't believe it.
Diego, but Diego has nothing to say after being coached by freaking Joshua Fabia with all his Hadouken fireball energy that he brings into the cage now.
Dude, I still think that man got bamboozled. I think that man got straight up taken advantage of, and that's probably one of the sadder things in the MMA universe. There's things like Jason Mayhem Miller and his decline, and to see Diego Sanchez go from one of Tufts Wonder Boys in the beginning to being taken advantage of by this fucking cult leader dude punching him while he's upside down.
I honestly gives him too much credit calling him a cult leader. I think he's just a con man. He's just a con man. He's just a dude who pretends to be a fight coach.
Yeah. It's kind of sad, man. And I hope karma is a real thing so that Fabia gets what's coming to him, because that's pretty messed up what he did to that man.
Well, we could dedicate an entire segment to talking about Diego Sanchez, his career, and his involvement with certain coaches. But let us move on to the next segment. This is the Priaulx Rankings. Mark, why don't you take us through who rose and who fell off of the heels of UFC Fight Night, Sandhagen versus Dillashaw?
So we only got a couple movers this week who were notable. They're both risers. I will say off the bat, I've had a few people tell me oh, you got to get the Priaulx Rankings up on a site. You got to get them up on social media so we can see them all. We will. We all have day jobs. It's a lot of work. We're going to get them. Don't worry. We're going to get them. So the movers for this week are, as discussed, Rallian Paiva, former flyweight, moving up to bantamweight, and on the back of beating Kyler Phillips, even though it was a draw, enters the rankings at number 16. So quite a jump for Paiva from a flyweight who was not super relevant to the number 16 bantamweight. But that's where I got him at. And then Imavov moving from number 54 at middleweight, because he hadn't done much prior to Saturday, to number 20 after finishing Ian Heinisch. And then by proxy, which I always find interesting, is Phil Hawes moving up. I now have him at 19. And I always find that aspect so interesting that Phil Hawes, so if you don't know, he has a win over Imavov. He's 3-0 in the UFC. That's one of his wins. I find it so interesting that Phil Hawes was probably sitting home watching that fight, rooting strongly for Imavov, because if Imavov makes this jump, Hawes has to make it with him. So I had Imavov at 54. Now he's up to 20. Hawes I had higher, but he was maybe around low 30s, and now I've got him at 19. So definitely a jump for him. Changes where he's at in terms of what fight he may get next. But those are the movers in the ranks for this week.
Very nice. All right, boys. Coming up now, let's move on to some fight announcements and some MMA news. So some big fight announcements have just recently been made. Number one, we have in the books Usman versus Covington 2, which is going to be taking place at UFC 268 on November 6th. So Omar, I'm going to start with you. What is your initial reaction to this fight being booked yet again for a second time? And what are your thoughts on the matchup?
I'm totally fine with it. Any chance to watch Colby Covington get his jaw broken, count me in. I'll be there 100%. I think at this point, I have no reason to believe that Colby is going to win that fight. None. I think in the first fight, a lot of people give Colby credit for his striking and, for the shots that he landed and stuff like that. I give him less credit, I guess. It was a very competitive fight for sure. Definitely a very active fight. As far as, cardio is concerned, that might be one of the top tier fights as far, when it comes to cardio. I don't think there was any point where they stopped, I think, at all. So there is that. But Usman in the first fight, which apparently he wasn't even 100% in, he kind of beat the shit out of him a little bit, especially as the fight went further down the line. And I think Usman has gotten better. Usman's gotten significantly better. Usman is now training with Trevor Whitman.
I love Trevor Whitman, man.
I mean,
he's so good. He's such a good coach.
I mean, if your striking doesn't get better when you're training with Trevor Whitman, then you shouldn't be fighting, because that's not his fault. You know what I mean? Colby's hands are not impressive to me. What's impressive to me about Colby is that he can keep throwing those hands without stopping. That's impressive. But Colby's actual boxing and like his technique, there's nothing impressive about it. I think that Usman has gotten to the point where he knows how to lay somebody out. He knows how to strike properly, on top of the fact that his cardio is endless. I don't see anything that Colby presents to Usman as a challenge. They didn't take each other down in the first fight for a reason, because they probably can't. And they probably can't hold each other down either. And I don't think either one of them want to waste time trying to do that to one another when it's not going to matter in the end. And I think that's why it ended up being a striking fight for the last, for 5 rounds. But I think Usman has significantly made that gap wider since the last fight.
Mark, what are your early thoughts on this new booking?
So I love the booking. Anytime you get guys who truly hate each other and they're the top 2 in the world at their weight class, sign me up for the fight. You can't ask for much more than that. Does Leon maybe have a gripe that he's not getting the shot yet? Yes. But I am fine with this, especially because Colby apparently just won't take any other fights because he thinks he's so deserving of a title shot. So whatever. They are 1-2 right now. They have a great rivalry. Let's do it. If Colby loses again and he's 0-2 against Usman, he's going to have to fight other people. So that's great. I'd like to see some other matchups with him, get the division moving. So let's do it one more time. And if he does somehow win, we have a friggin' awesome trilogy where they're going to hate each other even more than they did going into this one. Yeah. So I'm fine with it. I do agree with Omar that – so the first fight was a great fight. If I recall, I think I had a 2-2 going into the 5th. Mm-hmm. So it's not like Colby was I mean, he was getting his ass beat, but he wasn't getting his ass beat, if you know what I mean. He was winning some rounds. But I do think that Usman has gotten so much better. Mm-hmm. And maybe Colby has, but he's fought 1 time since then. So, like, how do we know? I can't imagine he's improved as much as Usman has, because Usman's is so noticeable. But I think maybe Colby looks to grapple more this fight, just because most of Usman's improvement has been on the feet. And Colby already knows that a pure striking match did not work out last time. Mm-hmm. So maybe he goes into this thinking, I have to force the grappling, and if it doesn't work, I'll adjust, but I'm going to try to force it early. So I'm interested to see it. I will pick Usman. It's hard not to pick a guy that looks as good as he's looked lately, but sign me up for all the pre-fight shit talk, for the build.
Oh yeah,
for all of it.
Definitely.
All the cringe. Yeah, it's coming.
Oh yeah. All right. The other main announcement that I wanted to point out tonight is Douglas Lima matching up against MVP Michael Venom Page once again for Lima MVP 2, which is going to be taking place at Bellator 267 on October 1st. Mark, what are your thoughts on this matchup being made a second time?
I love it. It's one I've been wanting. It's one MVP's been wanting. He thought Lima didn't want it. Maybe now that Lima lost his belt, he was like, all right, let's do it. So I'm not sure there, but it's a great fight. MVP has improved since the last time they fought. He kind of did get caught in the first fight in a way that makes you wonder what would have happened if the fight had continued. So I love that we get to see it again. MVP gets another chance to really assert himself as a top welterweight in the world. His standing will change drastically if he does manage to win this fight. It's in London, which is an interesting aspect that Lima's going to have to fight an away game here. And I just love the fight. They match up so well against each other, and I can't wait to see how it goes the second time around. And I imagine the winner is going to be probably fighting for a title.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that being said, that concludes our fight announcement and headlines. Now let's move on to the upcoming preview. On the Bellator side, we have Patricio Pitbull taking on the undefeated AJ McKee at Bellator 263 for the featherweight title and the featherweight Grand Prix tournament winner. So, Mark, what are your thoughts about Pitbull? He is one of the best fighters on the planet, taking on the undefeated AJ McKee.
We finally got to Bellator. Honestly, it only took us 3 episodes, which is pretty solid. So credit to Bellator. We're 3 episodes in. They made us talk about him. If you do not watch Bellator, start on Saturday. Fights don't get much better than this fight. This is probably the best fight that Bellator can put on right now. Mm-hmm. It is so closely matched. Last I looked, the odds were Pitbull minus 120 and McKee plus 100, which is basically a coin flip. Yeah. To your question, Mike, I think Pitbull's fantastic. I think a lot of people, I think the hardcores know it. Some who are more casual, don't watch as much Bellator, might not realize just how good he is. To me, he's no lower than the 3rd best featherweight on the planet. You want to put Volk and Holloway above him, I'm with that. Beyond that, I'm going to make an argument. His resume is that good. It stacks up against anyone you want to compare it to. The guy is the smaller man in most of his fights. It never seems to matter. He finishes guys. He's still getting better. He's fantastic. He's the best fighter in Bellator history. With that being said, AJ McKee is coming. Mm-hmm. He's undefeated, and he looks great.
He's so good.
I'm really getting sold by his self-belief. He has talked the entire time he's been in Bellator about fighting Pitbull. When I get there, what am I to do to him? And it has not stopped. It's a calm self-belief. He truly believes that he is the man to do this. And the more I hear it, the more he is selling me on it. It's an awesome matchup, and I cannot wait to see it.
Omar, what are your thoughts about this 17-0 AJ McKee taking on the amazing Patricio Pitbull?
I love it, man. I've been a big fan of AJ McKee now for a little bit. I his father was one of the people that, you go back when I went back watching older UFC fights, you obviously run into him and you watch him fight. And I think it's so amazing how much better his son is than he was. And I say that almost as a compliment to him being a father to this kid, right? You reached a point in your career where you are significant, right? We know who you are. We know what your name is, but you took everything that you learned, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. And you made sure that your son turned into this gold trophy of a fighter. And I love it, man. I love to see where he is right now. I love to see how good he is. A lot of guys, when they come in with undefeated records into an elite level, they don't always continue to perform at that kind of level. AJ McKee has. And he's proven time and time again that he is somebody to watch out for. And the fact that we're actually sitting here saying that there's probably a chance that he might beat Pitbull says, I think, more than enough, because Pitbull is not one of those guys where you generally get a chance to be like, well, he might lose this fight. Nah, you're usually trying to figure out how Pitbull's going to win this fight. Right. So this is probably one of the more exciting matchups that Bellator has had in recent history or recent memory. I can say, I'm super excited to watch it. I can't wait.
Pitbull, he may not be undefeated, but he has an incredible record of 32 wins and only 4 losses, including 11 wins by knockout and 12 more wins by submission. So quite the finish rate for Pitbull there.
Yeah, and you got to remember, these are fighting families, right? This is not, some dude that went to University of Florida and some other guy that went to I don't know, University of Massachusetts, whatever. This is not 2 random dudes. This is the Pitbull brothers, because I'm sorry, Mark, hit me with the other name. because I'm always bad with these two. Patrick.
Yes.
So you know Patricki's going to be there with Patricio. They're going to be in his corner, and you know that AJ is going to have his dad in his corner. These are two fighting families. I mean, this is like old school, clans about to go to war shit. This is top tier MMA, and I'm here for it. Absolutely. I'm so hyped.
Well, with that being said, let us turn our attention to our final topic. Wait.
Oh,
are
we not gonna predict the fight?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna predict the fight. So the first interesting thing to me in this fight is the size. Pitbull is 5'6" with a 65.5-inch reach. AJ McKee is 5'10" with a 73.5-inch reach. That's a 4-inch height and 8-inch reach advantage. Now, obviously, Pitbull has been the smaller man before. He's the smaller man often. He's even been outsized by this much before against Emmanuel Sanchez, who's just as long as McKee is, if not an inch longer, I believe. And we saw what he did to him. But Sanchez is not as skilled as McKee. He can't use the length in the same way. So I think that's going to be a really interesting factor to watch. And call me crazy, I kind of think McKee has advantages everywhere this fight goes. He has to make sure that he doesn't end up in the short range game, because Pitbull's power is such a factor. But range boxing, kickboxing, I should say, wrestling, grappling, Pitbull's incredible at all these. I think McKee might be better. Again, I might be crazy. I might look stupid after this fight. I am very sold on AJ McKee. And I really think he's going to find a way to get this done. This might be the kind of thing where he's not ready yet, and 2 years from now, this fight happens again, and it plays out the way I'm imagining it in my head. But I'm going for it right now.
Okay.
Straight striking, I think he's going to give Pitbull problems. I think he's going to force Pitbull to have to close the distance and maybe even initiate the wrestling. But he's so slick on the ground. He snatches up subs out of nowhere. He's a great wrestler himself. I think that he's going to give Pitbull a lot of problems. And I'm going to roll with him. I'm going to say McKee wins a decision here. My only concern is the cardio, that we don't know exactly what McKee's cardio is. But from everything I've seen, I have no reason to doubt it. I'm going to say that McKee stakes his claim as arguably the best featherweight on the planet.
Omar, who is your pick? Method and style.
Well, I'm gonna tell you this, Mark. We're both going to the goddamn loony bin together.
Oh, baby.
And we're gonna go to the loony bin together, because my pick might be even crazier than yours.
Oh gosh.
I think he submits him.
He submits
Love
him.
I think he submits Patricio. I really do, man. I think his submission game, I think, is not talked about wide enough. He's an opportunistic submission artist, but at the same time, he creates a lot of those opportunities. But he's one of those dudes that when he sees it, he's going to go for it. But that being said, Patricio is not a slouch. You know, he's been grappling for a long time. He knows how to fake people out. He knows how to get people to think that they might have a submission that they don't. I just don't think it matters. I just don't think it'll matter. I think AJ has a certain confidence, to Mark's credit. And I think Patricio has a certain amount of overconfidence as a result. And I think AJ is going to submit him. And I think it's going to be crazy. And I can't wait to be right about this. I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
We're just so interested in the shiny new toy.
Maybe.
If we're really right that he's this good, but I can't wait to see if we are.
Oh, I hope I could come back next week and say I was right.
I think this is going to be potentially a war. It's going to be a back and forth fight, but I think Pitbull is going to hurt him a number of times, and I'm going to take Pitbull by unanimous decision.
Oof.
All right.
Certainly.
And with that, let us turn our attention towards this coming Saturday night's card. This Saturday night, July 31st, UFC Fight Night, Hall versus Strickland, a middleweight matchup of consequence, with both fighters bringing a 4-fight win streak into the cage. Uriah Primetime Hall takes on Sean Strickland, who is 23 1-3 coming off, like I said, a 4-fight win streak. Omar, I'll start with you. This fight, it means a lot at middleweight. Talk about the matchup and ultimately who you're going to pick.
Yeah, it's a great matchup. I think stylistically it's super interesting. I think we finally gotten to the point where we're seeing Uriah Hall kind of break out of that shell that, we never really knew if he was going to go full-blown killer in the UFC. He's a super nice guy, and he's had issues kind of wanting to really hurt people in the past. But I think we've hopefully gone far past that at this point, and we've seen, the new birth of Uriah, and he's been very, very good. Even apart from the Chris Weidman thing, which I don't really hold too high in regard. It was obviously something he did, he checked the kick, he did it on purpose. We've talked about it before, but it was a moment, right? It wasn't really a fight. You can't really get too much from that actual event. But he's fantastic. I think he's always been a very, very skilled striker. I don't think his issues have ever been skill-based. I think his issues have always been a mental game. And I think if he's wrapped his head around it, I think he has all the tools necessary to beat Sean Strickland. That being said, Strickland is a very dangerous opponent, but I don't see him being better in any aspect over Uriah Hall.
Okay, Mark. Strickland is coming off of a pretty impressive victory over Jotko and a TKO victory over Brendan Allen. What would you say are the keys to victory for him over Uriah Hall, and what do you think of the matchup?
So, yeah, Strickland is a guy who I have always thought was better than he had shown, and it seems like he's finally broken through now and gotten to where he should be. The keys for the matchup, it would be great for him if he is able to mix in some wrestling. I just don't know if that's going to be possible against Uriah Hall. He would love to work behind his jab and to see it's hard because Hall is so dangerous, and I'm picking Hall in this fight, which is why I'm struggling a little bit to say how I think Strickland wins the fight. He's so dangerous on the counter. So I think Strickland would have to play a patient game, make sure he doesn't rush in with any shots where he's going to get clipped, and have a variety of strikes and the threat of the takedown to keep Hall somewhat off balance. I think that's probably the strategy for Sean Strickland. But I do love this matchup. And the craziest thing to me about the matchup is the odds. To me, when I saw this, I think this is like a pick 'em fight. And I was going to go with Hall, but I think it's a really close fight. The odds are Sean Strickland minus 210, Uriah Hall plus 175. So you're getting Hall as almost a 2-1 dog, which I love. For anyone who doesn't gamble, I love Hall at that price, which means, again, it's a close fight, and I think I would take Hall. I wouldn't say I love Hall if I'm straight picking the fight. Mm-hmm. Hall at plus 175, I love. For you to be getting him at nearly 2-1 odds. Mm-hmm. To me, I think he does win this fight. It's 5 rounds. We haven't seen Strickland go 5 rounds. I trust Hall's cardio. We haven't seen him go full 5, but we've seen him go 4. I think it may turn to his advantage later in the rounds, but more so in a 5-round fight. I just think it's hard to spend 25 minutes in a cage with Uriah Hall and not get caught by something devastating. So that, combined with the fact that I don't really think Strickland is going to have much success taking Uriah Hall down, and that he's going to have to play a straight striking battle with someone as dangerous as Hall, I like Hall to win this fight, and I certainly like risking it at those odds.
I think we're going to see Sean Strickland bringing that trash talk back into the cage, like we've seen in the past few fights that he's been in, which has brought a lot of attention to him, really. I think his name has sort of risen, I think in large part because of those videos that have circulated with the audio in the cage, turned up a lot to hear what he's saying in there. Yeah. I think he gets in the head of Uriah Hall, and I'm a Uriah Hall guy, but Hall always tries to be, very stoic, throughout the course of a fight. And I think Strickland distracts him enough with his trash talk And I think Strickland's going to get a decision victory here over Uriah Hall in advance.
It's an interesting take. I could see that.
I actually see that going the other way around. Uriah seems like one of those kids that he spent a lifetime getting shit talked. I think the whole reason he's in the UFC is because he's fucking done. He's done.
He talks a lot about like bullying the bullies.
I don't think he's going to go in there, get talked to by Sean Strickland, and somehow be that. If anything, I think Sean Strickland's going to end up paying for that, probably really, really badly.
I'm here for it. It's a great fight. It's a shame that there is nearly nothing else on this card. Like, I wish I could tell you guys something to look out for on this card.
Right.
The card is so weak that there are 3 fights on the entire card that don't include someone who has a losing record in the UFC.
Wow.
So there's not a lot of interest that I can tell you guys about here. If anything, I would say the rest of the Bellator card is significantly stronger than the rest of the UFC card this weekend.
We do, however, get to see Nico Montano come back.
Here we go.
So we can at least figure out what the hell is going on there.
If she makes it to the cage, we got a few days left.
Yeah, I mean, I was a fan of that girl just based off of pure storyline, for Tough, but it's a little ridiculous now. Now we just need to see where you're at. A lot of time has passed. Whatever happened back then, honestly, at this point, does not matter anymore now. I need to see her fight because I thought she had a lot of grit. She was very raw, not very good, but she was a fighter for sure. So I'm hoping the time off, I'm hoping that there's real improvement there, because if there's not, I don't see her going anywhere in that division.
She's another one kind of like Sarge, though, where I think she could matter at 125, but with her fighting at 135, I don't know if she has enough size to beat the upper echelon of that division. And I don't even mean upper, I mean top 10 of that division. Yeah. But we shall see. I would think she could at least get a W this weekend.
God, I hope so.
Not the most difficult matchup against Yanan Wu.
I can't see if she loses how she stays in the UFC. I honestly think that they just cut her. I really do.
I'm a little surprised they haven't already with all the different issues that she had. But I guess coming off Tough, they wanted to make sure they gave her a true shot.
Yeah, and I think they would. I think it looks bad too if they just cut her based off of injuries at this point. The girl hasn't fought.
True.
It's just they would be cutting her off of injuries, and I think they've already invested in her. They've got, I'm assuming, a nice little package of her winning Tough and all this stuff that they can build up, when she goes out to fight. But at the end of the day, she's got to show something, because at this point, if she doesn't, there's really no point in her being there. She's ranked 15 generously, as far as I'm concerned, in the bantamweight division.
Yeah.
So she got to do something, man. Do something. I'm rooting for her too. So I hope she does something. All
right, boys. Well, let's wrap this one up. If you're still with us, thank you so much for watching this. Thank you for being a part of this. We love you. If you're watching this right now, please smash that like button the way that Adrian Yanez smashed Costa. And if you're returning to this channel and you haven't yet subscribed yet, redeem yourself like TJ Dillashaw. And hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Find us wherever you find your podcasts, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter and join the conversation. Boys, any parting words?
Can't top that. Thank you, guys. Love you guys. Keep listening.
Remember to watch Bellator and UFC. Don't skimp on your Bellator tonight or this weekend.
Peace.
Later.
Peace.